Alex, you're
Hey,
getting a you're getting a friend in New York.
I am. Vinny
How's
Caravella is
that?
going to come be
How
my
does that
friend.
feel? Oh, yep. Vinny has signed up to be part of the buddy program,
Yeah.
which he decided. You know what? The person on the staff that needs a buddy the most, it's Alex Navarro.
Yeah, as I think I'm what considered a giant bomb staff member that is at risk. Uh, at risk for what? I don't really know.
You've been on your own the longest,
Yeah, I'm at
so
risk for crippling loneliness that will never ever go away. So this is how they're getting around that. This is how they're gonna get through all the potential legal hurdles of that by giving me someone so that my crippling loneliness doesn't kill me.
yeah, no, that's awesome. I am very excited to see what happens with all of that stuff that occurs in the coming weeks and months, which people have been asking, but very few conversations have actually been had about what occurs in terms of like, does this show get impacted? Probably, but in
Yeah,
what way? I don't know. And
no idea.
we'll worry about all that stuff once Mr. Caravella is settled, has actually moved. There are lots of things that needs to happen between now and then. I'm sure this show will not go away entirely, but obviously when change occurs and there are new people in New York, new things are going to happen, and that's exciting. So
Yes.
that is more or less the only thing that has been decided is that things will be exciting.
Yeah, that, and I'm also going to force Vinny Caravella to become a wrestling fan. That's really the only two things that are determined at this point.
That's you know what? I would love to watch the transformation or at least the psychological destruction of Vinny Caravella into a wrestling fan.
Yeah, no, that's definitely on the table. Yeah, Vinny and I have talked a little bit about some of the stuff we want to do. But in the initial goings, it's just going to be like, okay, let's lock down our office space. Let's make sure we have equipment. Let's make sure we have, everything we need to actually do the things we want to do. So there aren't a lot of solid plans yet as to exactly what kinds of features and content and how the morning show will be affected and all that stuff. That's all going to come kind of after we're a little bit more settled. But we are talking about that stuff now, which is good. It's always good to sort of plan ahead on these things. Kind of a new concept for me. I'm into it.
You've been on your own for a long time. Now you're gonna have someone that like is a producer and tells you, hey, you have to go do this.
And I'm looking forward to that so much. I cannot even tell you.
So you reviewed Wolfenstein this week.
I did. Wolfenstein:
The
The
only
New
thing
Order.
the only thing you could tell us on Monday was that whoa, this game is weird.
Yeah, it is weird. It's a weird mix of the hyper-violence of what a Wolfenstein game is generally kind of known for, and this very like really dark undercurrent of storytelling that is, it's kind of trying to be sort of this examination of the sort of cruelty of man and the horrors of war and all that kind of stuff. Meanwhile, you're fucking Nazi killing dudes in an alternate history 1960 with crazy laser weaponry and going to the fucking moon and shit. Like it's this bizarre. Tonally, it is one of the most bizarre games I've played in a very long time, but it also happens to be a pretty damn fun one, which is a nice change of like. Honestly, it was kind of unexpected. I mean, Machine Games is a new studio. They come with a good pedigree. A lot of them, the founders of that studio, came from Starbreeze during their ideal era. But you never quite know what you're going to get with a first game like that, especially something that's sort of like trying to insert itself into an existing franchise. And I think they did a pretty spectacular job with just making a shooter that is a lot of fun. And even if some of the story beats and some of the character stuff doesn't always work, it's a lot more ambitious than I would ever expect anyone to be with a game called Wolfenstein.
Yeah, that was probably I've played up until escaping the asylum. So I've done like the first mission and then had the period transition and then
How
I've
good
just
is that opening credit sequence? Like that bit where like he's in the asylum and they do that sort of like quick transitional bit.
I think that it's fantastic, and I think that's like it's a very strange part of the game in which the tonal stuff that you allude to, in which they want to have their cake and eat it too, which is to say they want to embrace the legacy of Wolfenstein, which is sort of weird and sci-fi and kind of out there, but also tell a weighty story.
Yeah.
And they seem to kind of sometimes run into walls and just keep running into them because they want it to be serious and they want to tell an emotional connection between various characters, and the idea of like the Third Reich taking over the world is this, this awful scenario and what might happen and what the ramifications with that would be. But then also he's like grumbling one-liners to himself.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of those one-liners veer pretty wildly between just him fucking grumbling under his breath about how he wants to kill somebody, and him like having these sort of, I'm going to say, the thin red line light sort of like, observations about death and destruction and the cruelty of man and all that kind of stuff. And it's a little hokey in a way. Like, B.J. Blazkowicz is not a character that I expect much deep commentary from, and when they try to make him do that, it is not ideal. The actor who plays him isn't bad, but the writing for that character is not spectacular. But I think the rest of the characters in that game, though they're not afforded a ton of time individually, make up for that. There are a lot of differing and interesting personalities among the resistance fighters you meet. Some of the villains are again, not given necessarily enough time to really establish themselves, but as personalities, they're a lot more interesting than just bargain basement evil Nazi types. And again, my main complaint is that I just don't think they went far enough with that stuff, because a lot of times it feels like the game is constantly hurrying you along to the next part where you get to go kill people, which is fine. I get that. It's a shooter. They want you to be shooting stuff the majority of the time. But if you're going to go to the level where you're going to actually spend time creating these characters and giving them personalities beyond the rote, just like this is the person who gives you instructions in a mission and that's it, level, flesh it out. Spend the time on them. Let you get to know these characters so that when you do something that is supposed to have an emotional impact later in the game, you actually feel it, as opposed to just going, oh, well, that's too bad.
Well, it's interesting. I wonder how much of this is the struggle over what you do with a Wolfenstein game in 2014, with a team that is clearly talented enough and capable of telling a engaging, emotional story within such a silly context. And not that you can't use sort of out there premises in order to tell sort of grounded, emotional stories between characters, but I wonder if that just speaks to. There was a tweet going around this week that had a image of B.J. Blazkowicz from the original game, and then an image of him from the modern game, in which the first tweet was, "Man, look how far games have come," because it started as like this little pixelated box, and this like highly detailed 3D model that looks incredible and is is fairly realistic for a guy of like unrealistic proportions. And then this other person took that and flipped it around and said, this doesn't actually show how far games have come. This actually shows how little games have moved in the last 20 years, which sort of struck a nerve with me in that, like, why are we telling another Wolfenstein story in 2014? Yes, Machine Games seems to have done just about as much as you can do with the Wolfenstein game in 2014, which is to say people are probably pretty tired of this being totally out there, so we need to ground it in something so that it's a little more interesting. But why are they making it a Wolfenstein game in the first place? I know the answer to that question because they own the license and they have to do something with it. But like just more generally, it's sort of depressing that there's another Wolfenstein game, and it's almost more depressing that it's pretty good, because I wonder if they could have done more if they were given a little less constraints around a specific franchise.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I get the impression. I mean, I don't know what Bethesda's level of interest is in focus testing or trying to sort of micromanage projects like that. I mean, I don't know exactly how much they got involved in Machine Games' direction of that game, but it does feel like there were parts of that game that were just cut out because the pace needed to move quicker. Like someone said, you're spending too much time on this character, you're spending too much time trying to establish this, you're not getting people into the shooting fast enough, you should go make them shoot faster. And it's a little, it's irritating in the sense that, again, these are interesting personalities. They spend the time giving you the backstory for them and having actors who obviously know what they're doing portray them. And then it just doesn't really do a whole lot with them outside of, again, a few little interactions here and there that are interesting, and then just a lot of like mission talk. And it's like, cutscenes like will just sort of jarringly like go from moment to moment, just like cutting what feels like large swaths of the story out just to get you back into another mission. And again, the shooting is fun. That's the key thing. It is fun to play the game. It is exciting. Like, even playing stealth in that game works, which is a minor miracle in a game like that. Like, you would expect the stealth to be awful, but I actually played it stealthy a lot of the time.
And I think part of the reason it works is they give you, completely unexplained, but who cares? Basically, a distance meter between you and the commander. So, like, when you switch to the stealth sections, the game, like, really smartly explains, without like beating you over the head with it, that you're basically entering a section that you should be stealthy in, or at least you have the option or an advantage if you are stealthy, in which you have commanders that if you kill them, they can't call backup, and until you kill them, they'll keep calling backup, and you can die pretty quickly in Wolfenstein.
Yeah.
Especially because you have to manually pick up health. You can't just run around and it'll just add to your total, which is an annoyance that is separate from this point. But that the stealth sections are kind of fun because the AI dumbs itself down enough that you do feel like you can kind of sneak around, and throwing a knife from across the room at a guy's face is pretty satisfying.
Yeah, and the thing that I'll say to the AI is that, yeah, when you're just like walking around and the AI hasn't been alerted, it's pretty generous. It'll let you, if someone sees you peeking around a corner, they're not going to come straight at you. Like, you have a little bit of leeway. But when they are alerted and they are coming after you, they're actually pretty good. Like, they use tactics. They know how to flush you out of cover spots. Like, you can't just camp down in one spot forever and expect to get away with it, which is a nice. It's a good balance, I think, between the kind of just dumbing down a little bit for the sake of making sure the player can do these things like the stealth stuff well, and actually making the firefights pretty tough. I think, like, I got into some real intense difficulty spikes, especially toward the end of the game. Not always the most fun when the game starts getting really hard, but I at least admired the fact that it forced me to stay on my toes and keep rethinking my tactics.
Yeah, and I actually found that they don't maybe teach you enough about it when the feature is introduced, but the slide mechanic, which allows you to kind of like skate along the ground but also still be firing, really useful for like group situations, and you manage to dodge a lot of bullets in the process. But they sort of just introduce it and then just say, I don't know, go use it later if you want, I guess. And I think that is an important strategy that maybe they don't emphasize enough. But I will say that the game's perk system is brilliant. I love the way that you sort of kind of buff up your character attributes over time is to perform specific tasks. Like, for example, throw a grenade and kill 2 guys with a single grenade, and then boom, you've unlocked a perk that makes your, I'm not sure what it exactly is, but like, let's just say it makes your grenades more powerful. Or another one is like do 5 stealth kills with the throwing knives, and then you can carry more knives. And what I like about it is that it kind of gives the same sort of sensation that I get in sort of like a Ratchet and Clank game, where I start doing tactics that I wouldn't necessarily rely on because it's fun to unlock the skill tree. Like, just getting the upgrades gives me that little endorphin burst. And so, well, maybe I'm not gonna. It's why the reason I ended up discovering the slide move being useful, because one of the perks is, do a slide move and kill 3 guys while you're sliding, and then suddenly I realize, holy shit, that's really useful for getting around corners.
Yeah, I wish the perk system was a little bit more obvious about what it's actually doing for you, and there were definitely some perks that I got that I never even noticed I had until I went into the menu and looked like, oh, I have this. This is apparently a benefit that I have. I did not realize it. It's a smart way of unlocking that stuff, I agree. I just wish the actual perks themselves were a little better, and that the game was a little bit more adamant about you understanding what those perks do and why you should get them, because for the most part, I managed to go through the entire game not even really thinking about that system unless I happened to be in that menu and notice it was there.
Well, I think it's interesting. Yeah, sure. I think it's an interesting concept, though. I think in terms of how you do perk systems, I found that to be more fascinating than just like gaining experience in between levels and then just assigning them. Like, actually making the player perform an act, and by doing so, maybe discovered something about the game mechanics that they wouldn't have discovered, because you can play a lot of that game just dual wielding and running through every room.
Yep.
And that is a completely valid way to play. It's a totally fun way to play sometimes. But what I like is that they've fleshed out these other systems, and while the perk system may not be perfect, it at least gives you an incentive to play around with some of the other systems. Because I did find, like you, the stealth worked more than I expected, because as soon as it was introduced, I was like, well, this is where I just shoot guys and don't engage with this. But in fact, I found the stealth to be pretty enjoyable.
Yeah. The stealth is better than average. So, like you said, there is something to be said for just dual wielding automatic shotguns and just blasting the living shit out of everything that happens to hoove its way into your field of vision. That is deeply satisfying. If only for the just unbelievably just voluminous clouds of red goop that just flies everywhere when you do that. That is a seriously gory game, as a Wolfenstein game probably should be. But man, there were some times when I was just watching heads explode, body parts explode, all that shit. I was just like, God, this is just what people think video games is. This is like the total. This is the sterling example of what people who don't play video games imagine video games being. And maybe there's something wrong with that, maybe not, I don't know, but it kind of is. Yeah.
And you mentioned this in your review, speaking to some of the tonally weird stuff. Like, for example, like very early in the game, it's not a spoiler that, there's a jump in time because your character experiences a concussion, and that sets in motion the main events of the game where the Nazis have taken over, and you need to try and find a way to stop them. Is that you awake from this, I believe 14-year concussion, and like you're in bad shape. Like,
not just a concussion, like comatose state.
You've just watched an elaborate, extremely well done cutscene, like that does a lot of storytelling very, very quickly in a way that games are traditionally very, very bad at. Maybe not video games, but just video game writers. And just kind of in awe at how well they were conveying a lot of story very, very quickly and establishing characters in a way that you're like, oh, I get them and I get the emotional connection. It was great. And then you stand up and you can do all the shit that Blazkowicz could do when he was at the top of his game. Like, he can slide across floors, and it works. Like, you get over it immediately. But I don't even know if that's a bad thing. I think it just speaks to the inherent weirdness of the game in general. And again, I don't even necessarily think that's a bad thing. It's just, it's odd.
Well, he wakes up and his muscle structure has not changed one bit in 14 years.
He has not atrophied whatsoever,
no,
despite the fact that he has not moved in 14 years. And when I screwed up my shoulder and I didn't use my left arm for 2 weeks, it atrophied to the point that when I laid on my side, this part of my arm could not lift a 1 pound weight. That's how quickly your muscles atrophy. And I'm not asking for realism in Wolfenstein. That is an impossible standard to reach. I just thought it actually made me laugh the first time when I realized I could slide.
I just imagine these kindly old Polish people who run this asylum taking him into their basement gym and like manually forcing his arms to lift weights or something. Like, that's the only way that could possibly be, and it's just so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
So that's enough about Wolfenstein. Whatever. It's super good. The reviews on the site. I enjoyed it a lot more than I actually thought it would.
Does it have multiplayer?
No. None multiplayer.
Interesting. Well, I guess you get that Doom code in there, though, which is for multiplayer.
Yeah, Doom Beta. It's like right there on the box. Look at the Doom Beta. You can go to that.
Could not have something more tonally opposite from Wolfenstein that came out this week. I wish I said I could say I played more of it. I'm wondering if you did. Did you play any Transistor?
I did. I've played about 4 hours of Transistor, 4 or 5, somewhere in there.
Are you playing on PC?
I'm playing on PS4.
Okay, so the PC version has problems.
Oh no.
There is a intense hitching problem where about every, let's say, minute or so, the game just straight up stops for about
Oh.
2 to 3 seconds. It is. I'm not sure exactly what the issue is. You can apparently put your game into offline or Steam into offline mode. So it'll stop pinging a server, and then that appears to fix it for most people. That problem
Oh.
got fixed for me when when I turned it into offline mode. But then the game just crashed. 2 different times, just a hard crash where the game just hard locked, and then 2 other times where I entered a room, it just went black, and then I
Oh.
had to Control-Delete. So it seems like the PC version is having some issues, unfortunately. But the hour or so I did play was pretty fantastic, and I purposely avoided checking out anything about this game because I knew, hey, I loved Bastion. I don't need to play any of a Transistor. I'll just play it when it comes out. So I honestly had very little concept of the combat system, which genuinely surprised at how familiar and different it is from Bastion.
Yeah, so the thing I'm enjoying the most is the combat system. I didn't like I've played it. I didn't necessarily understand exactly how it all would fit together just in playing the demos that they've had at various events. But once you kind of get a few battles in, you start to earn some of the new attack abilities, and you realize how you can kind of mix and match those things into the different weapon slots, and then use the different attacks as sort of like buffs for the main ones that you want to use. It's a really elegant and surprisingly just enjoyable system. It's strategically minded, but it's not overly difficult. And the thing where you're going through the world and you'll enter these like sort of training area backdoors do a really good job of actually kind of forcing you to learn some of the intricacies of those attack systems, and like you have to kill these guys quickly, or you have to kill a certain number of waves of enemies, and that sort of forces you to learn the system and get good at figuring out how the different abilities work together. So that has been a really pleasant surprise for me. Like, I've been really invested in the battles. Like, every time a battle comes up, I don't groan. I'm like, okay, cool. Here's a new way to try some stuff out and see what happens. And the art is amazing. Like Gen Z is a terrific artist, and the look of the game is spectacular. And I love the music. I really love Logan's performance throughout the game. Like, it's nuanced. It's not just like Rux Redux, which is nice. The only thing I'm not super loving about it yet is the story.
I was gonna ask because I played about an hour before I just decided I'm gonna go play Wolfenstein, and when I come back from vacation, this will all be patched and I'll be good to go. But so Bastion, I don't want to say the game hits you over the head with the story, but the story has a narrator that is explaining everything that's happening to you as it's occurring. It was a novel, creative choice that hadn't seen in a game before that I thought worked really, really well. And it seems like with Transistor, despite you have a sword that talks to you, he doesn't act as a narrator. He's just a character. The story seems kind of obfuscated in a way that 1 hour in, I'm not entirely sure what's going on, which maybe you can illuminate whether that changes as you get a little hours in and the world kind of fleshes out a little bit, but it feels like they purposely went in the opposite direction, and it's left me a little bit confused, at least in the early goings.
Yeah, I mean, just straight up, when you started that game up, did you think that you had missed like an opening cutscene somewhere, like you had accidentally skipped through something because of the way it starts?
Yeah, there are ways to start abruptly mid-scene, but
Yeah.
I started and I was like, oh, I must have hit start and just like skip something by accident.
Yeah, and so it's purposely opaque from the get-go, and like as you go along, going to those different terminals, reading what's going on, you'll get like voice messages from some other characters in the game. That helps flesh it out a little bit. Like, I now have a greater understanding of what this world is that they're in, like what the city is all about, the fact that it is sort of like this. In theory, it's like this sort of technocratic utopia where like everything is sort of digitized. You can program what color you want the sky to be, that kind of stuff. Like it's a very I'm not going to say Matrix-like, but it is sort of like a computerized world that you are sort of manipulating using the transistor, and this process stuff is sort of like a corruption of that. But as far as like who the villains are, why I'm really, like why I'm set against them, what it is, how this all sort of ties together, I haven't really gotten a great sense of that yet. And, again, it's like all the aesthetic qualities are there, and I really, really like the combat. I just feel like I don't really understand at all why it is any of this is taking place. And it's like you said, I think that it's just a little too... It's just a little too evasive about bringing details out and letting you understand what the context for any of this is. Like it's trying to be very vague, but it's being vague in a way that's a little bit distracting.
Yeah, and I wonder, there's some people in the chat who have finished the game saying like, oh, everything converges and kind of comes together, and it'll all make sense. And I certainly, I don't doubt that, but at least in the early going, it's abrupt if you're used to the storytelling styles of Supergiant. If you extrapolate from one game to be the storytelling styles of Supergiant, but it was so distinctive that the transition is a little bit jarring, and I do find the execution of the early stuff to be a little clumsy. It may just be me acclimating to the world and its storytelling, but I have found it hard to engage with the world very quickly, which was not the case with Bastion. Like Bastion was just like a light bulb, and you're just
in there,
and it's fantastic. Whereas, the combat I think in Bastion takes a little bit longer to get going, and the combat in Transistor is immediate. It is cool and compelling and strategic from the moment you start playing. So the games have a little bit of a different sort of flavor that I'm excited to keep playing more. There's people are saying they played the PC version, had no problems, but just check the Steam forums, and my issues are not mine alone, and they're well aware of them. So I'm excited to play more and to see where it goes. But it's really interesting to see an action game try and slow down the combat a little bit, I guess, and yet not slow it down at all. It's a really, really interesting mix.
Yeah, I'm really engaged with it now. Like once I started reviewing Wolfenstein, I kind of had to put it to the side after playing for about an hour. But last night I got some time with it, and I just kind of wanted to keep playing until I realized it was like, oh, it's 12:30. I should probably go to bed. It's I think that all the elements around the story are very good. I certainly want to see it through to the end. I'm just, I'm not going to say I'm super disappointed by it, but I'm definitely a little bit like, well, I kind of wish I understood a little bit more about what was going on. And, hopefully it all comes together in the end. I think even if it doesn't, I'm still enjoying the combat enough to where that's enough to keep me interested. Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to playing that when I get back. I'm already stressed out that despite the fact this week I managed to finish Super Time Force, Tesla Effect, and the Outlast DLC, that I'm just scratching the surface on Wolfenstein. I can't play Transistor, and by the time I come back, Watch Dogs will be out.
Yeah, God, that is out next week, isn't it?
Yeah. I finished Super Time Force. Don't really have anything else to say except I think it's fantastic. I've heard a lot of folks tell me that the hardcore mode that opens up at the end really is kind of where the game shines, because I didn't have a whole lot of problem finishing Super Time Force. I enjoyed it. It had some challenging moments between me getting from one end of the level to the next, but I never had to restart because I, really, really screwed up, because you have enough continues or clones that you can create that you can get yourself out of basically any jam, and apparently hardcore mode is not that at all, and you really need to be thinking about your placement. So I'm looking forward to maybe having some free time at some point and checking that out, because it really seems like that's where the real Super Time Force starts there, as they say. But have you played anything else this week?
No. I've been meaning to get back to Super Time Force. I just, with other things going on, haven't had a chance to do it. That's going to be kind of my weekend game at this point. Other than that, that's really all I have lined up right now. It's that and, inevitably more fucking Hearthstone, because goddammit, that thing has its hooks in me deep. I spent money in Hearthstone for the first time.
Oh, no.
No, I mean, whatever. I've spent many, many hours playing that game, and I was like, you know what? I just want to get a few extra packs, so I spent like $10. I figured $10 is a worthwhile amount of money to give them for the number of hours of entertainment they have given me. Here's the hilarious part. First pack I open, I get Illidan's fucking Storm Rage, like rare card.
Oh,
then
nice.
And then the second pack I open, I get another fucking super rare card. So I got like 2 of those in a row just by. I don't think that's part of the algorithm. Like suddenly you pay money and then you get the good cards. It was just a really weird happenstance to happen.
It might be.
That would be unfortunate if that were the case. If that's how they program that, that would suck. But I didn't mind giving them $10. I was like, you know what? I just want to kind of get some extra cards. I felt like I was just had a really lackluster deck for most of the classes, so I just kind of wanted to boost it up a little bit. And you know, again, with free-to-play games, it's like the whole point is you pay when you want to. And in this case, I felt like I've spent so many hours playing this game. There's nothing wrong with giving them a few dollars.
No, I think that's completely reasonable. And that's how those games, that's how those mechanics should work out, where you have played a game long enough to really enjoy it, and you're like, you know, I didn't pay anything for this game, and also maybe I can get some cool cards in the process. That seems pretty reasonable to me. It's not like you did it because you hit a wall and I can't keep playing unless I pay. Like, it's not a pay to win scenario necessarily. It's just you decided you wanted to get some cool cards and also give Blizzard $10 in the process for making a cool thing, which ain't bad.
No, I don't think it's bad at all, and you know, I probably won't do it again because now I have a pretty nice selection of class and generic cards. I feel like I'm winning enough. So, yeah, I'm good. I think I'm good for a little while. Though, god damn it, I cannot get over rank 19. Like, I keep getting up to the point where I'm going to hit the next level, and then I start losing like fucking crazy. It's driving me nuts.
Yeah, I've fallen off Hearthstone, unfortunately. I haven't played too much in the last couple of weeks. I've seen some tweets from various people who, friends of ours who travel a lot that also play Hearthstone, trying to test the limits of Hearthstone addictiveness and then reporting back on which airplane Wi-Fi will be fast enough to allow you to connect to the Hearthstone servers. Apparently, most plane Wi-Fi is not capable of doing it because most plane Wi-Fi is complete garbage.
It is.
But apparently, some people have managed to be on cross country flights and managed to pass that 6 hours with Hearthstone. So I'm going to be on a 6.5 hour flight tomorrow. And so I'll probably buy Wi-Fi on that. If it's there, I'll probably give it a shot.
Yeah, give it a shot. You know, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. Who knows? But it's worth trying, right? I mean, granted, your iPad battery will probably die halfway through that flight if you just play the whole damn time. But you know,
Do the Manta Ray says you don't get better packs or better cards for playing. Alex is just a ridiculously lucky bugger. You're also now a bugger, Alex. I hope you know.
That's fine.
He hears the legendary drop rate is roughly 1 card in every 80 packs. So, yeah, maybe you did get crazy lucky.
This is my lucky face.
Nicely done. Nicely done. So I finished it last night on Spoon with Scoops, the Outlast DLC Whistleblower, which I have to say I think is leaps and bounds better than Outlast was, which was a game I enjoyed, but I tend to not really. It's very difficult for horror to work in long stretches of time. We touched on this briefly when I started playing Outlast, but it was only reinforced by the 3-hour duration, probably less if you're a little speedier than I am, of Whistleblower. It from start to finish, there are times where you kind of get to take a breather, but then you're just right back in it immediately. And the game tells a quick, concise story that, surprisingly, they ditch all the mythology from Outlast, which is great because the mythology is terrible.
Right.
So instead, they just focus on one easy-to-tell story, which is that the reason you are a journalist coming to this mental asylum in Outlast in the first place is because someone on the inside leaked some documents to you. So in the DLC, you play as that whistleblower who leaked those documents, and that gives you a reason for leaving because you're going to be found out. It gives you a compelling reason to be holding a camera because you're trying to document everything that's going on here. And with 3 hours, they don't have to stretch it out too far. So you get some really crazy characters and some really crazy moments and not a lot of time to think and breathe about it, and then it's over, and it's fantastic. I could not recommend it more to folks that maybe enjoyed Outlast, maybe didn't get all the way through, I don't want to play a horror game for 7 hours because that's just too much. The DLC is sort of the perfect encapsulation of, I think, what horror can be as a video game, and it definitely comes highly recommended.
Now, can we talk a little bit about the moments that you experienced that you described as the most uncomfortable moment you've maybe experienced in a game yet?
Yeah, so I don't want to spoil exactly what happens. The archive is actually it'll be uploading after we finish this show, so it'll be up early this afternoon by the time it processes through our system. But in vague terms, one of the things that is kind of shitty about the horror genre is its treatment of women, in which like women and rape and sexual violence are constantly used as like really, really easy ways to sort of trigger emotional reactions from the viewer.
Right.
Like the horror media does that all the friggin' time. It's not even shock value at this point. It's just sort of a given that like that's going to happen in a lot of horror films at one point or another. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the horror film Teeth.
I am.
Okay, so in Teeth, it is I forget what the actual like myth it's based on, but essentially it's based on like a long-held
Vagina
myth.
dentata.
Yes, there it is. That, you know, a vagina can grow teeth and then chomp off some stuff if it chooses to. So that film explores that, and it's not a particularly great film, but I love the premise because it flips this trope of horror films on its head, which is that it's always the women who are being targeted. And in Teeth, you know, it's the men and making them uncomfortable, and that's what I'll say about Whistleblower, which is that it takes that idea, takes it to some really first-hand experience extremes.
Yeah.
And I wanted to turn off the game and turn off the stream. I didn't want to see what happened, and it was just a long moment where, you know, there's a buzzsaw, and you can just sort of imagine where like things might go from there. It's that was the noise I was making during the entire sequence. Was just
Now, wait, is this like a handsaw? Are you like strapped to like a conveyor belt that has like one of those log saws at the end of it, sort of like you know, in a bad cartoon or something? Like what are the mechanics of this?
It's just strapped to a table, and there's a buzzsaw, and you have no clothes on, and you're slowly moving closer to the buzzsaw, and they have rendered your whole body. It's weird. In a way that I think is pretty great, like especially in the context of horror as a genre, because part of the reason it made me super uncomfortable is because I am a dude, and that I thought was great. Like I have some more general issues with how that character that is doing that to you is contextualized, but that specific sequence is fan-fucking-tastic, because the reason I was made uncomfortable is specifically because they designed that sequence to make a guy uncomfortable, which is their primary demographic, and horror just almost never does that. And it works so beautifully in Whistleblower that I cannot imagine what that sequence would be like with Oculus.
Oh, man.
I don't want to understand what that sequence would be like with Oculus.
I think you've just unsold me on an Oculus Rift at some point. Like, I think I now no longer want one of those.
Yeah. It wouldn't work a second time around. Like, it wouldn't be nearly as shocking. You know, part of the reason the sequence works is because you are just like, this isn't happening. But it is. And yeah, it was genuinely surprising, and they sell it really, really well. You know, I have a general problem with Outlast that it's really not picking on Outlast so much as it's another thing that horror media does, which is just they tend to use like mental illness as a villain in like a really uncomfortable way over and over and over again, when like lots of people have various degrees of mental illness, and they are not crazed killers that are going to come after you, and so
like, for that matter.
Yeah, and it's just, man, how many movies and books and games have been set in a mental asylum? Like, there are other places in the world for horrible things to happen. So
Yes.
it's just sort of a tired thing in horror in general that sort of perpetuates a pretty nasty stereotype that is just not necessary. You can still accomplish crazy, deranged medical experiments without portraying people with mental illness as awful, crazy people. But yeah, that archive will be up today for premium members, and it is, whoo.
Sounds like a hell of a time.
Yeah, I was really glad when the credits rolled. I
Yeah.
was really, really glad when the credits rolled. So that's what I spent my time with this week. We should check out some of the news. There was some stuff that happened.
Some stuff happened this week.
They're doing Metro Redux, which we already kind of knew.
Mm-hmm.
They're taking Metro 2033 and Metro Last Light, bringing it to PS4, Xbox One, and PC, and SteamOS. So there'll be Linux versions of that as well. It's called a True Director's Cut, and the interesting thing is that they're updating Metro 2033 with like tweaked mechanics and things like that. They're going to have like multiple modes. So basically, Metro Last Light was a much better action game than Metro 2033, which to me, while interesting, theoretically, I thought 2033 worked better because it was sort of an awkward, disempowering experience. So they're keeping all that stuff in there. You just have to switch a toggle if you want those settings. But you can also get all the additional graphical fidelity and other changes that they're making. And yeah, I mean, the Metro series is terrific. I think 2033 is a better game and tells a better story than Last Light, but both of them are well worth playing.
Yeah. Yeah, I played a little bit of Last Light, but it was one of those games that like I really wanted to spend a hell of a lot more time with. I just for some reason fell off of it. Maybe this will be my opportunity to go back and actually play both of those games fully. But I say that about every time. Anytime anyone does a collection like this, and then 9 times out of 10 I do not. So.
Raflick in the chat is saying that Microsoft registered a new Phantom Dust trademark. Sir, you don't say things like that unless you mean them. To tease the idea that Microsoft would make a new Phantom Dust.
That could just be them just re-upping the trademark for the sake of keeping it in case they feel like doing something. Doesn't necessarily mean that they have a new thing in the works.
I refuse to get my hopes up about a new Phantom Dust because that's a fucking terrific game. That game is so good.
I don't know about that, but I
really?
I thought it wasn't bad. I thought it was neat, but I didn't love it or anything.
I'm not gonna get into it.
Okay. Hey.
I'm not gonna do it.
I'm not even gonna get into it.
ZeniMax filed a lawsuit against Oculus.
They did.
Which means shit just got real with Oculus and ZeniMax. I mean, basically, if you go on our site, in the story itself, I have at least for the next couple of weeks, I uploaded those documents to my Dropbox, so you can download those after I bought them from the court. And yeah, I mean, ZeniMax basically just outlines in more detail exactly what they said before, which is that all the advancements of Oculus were made while Carmack and other employees were still part of ZeniMax, and thus ZeniMax is owed a substantial amount of X. They haven't really said what, but money, cash money, or equity. I'm not sure if the equity matters as much now that they're purchased, but yeah, because I don't know how that stuff works necessarily. But yeah, I wonder what this means. It certainly seems to have gotten a whole lot more serious, though. Yeah,
I mean, but that also seems like this is where stuff was headed. I mean, there have been overtures toward trying to settle it, I guess, or there have been, at the very least, refutations by Oculus in regards to what ZeniMax was claiming. But at this point, ZeniMax didn't seem like they were really interested in a simple settlement or anything. They've been kind of belligerently pushing this ever since the Facebook buyout, and at this point, I totally expected this to happen. It seemed like the exact next step that was going to happen. I still think eventually this will just get settled with an amount of money. I think them taking it to court is just them trying to force the issue and get more money out of it. I don't think this will even end up in trial because I think that will be more expensive than either side really wants. But them at least filing the lawsuit it puts the hammer down in a way that says, look, these are our goddamn demands. This is what we want. Whether they'll get it or not, whether that's reasonable or not, will probably depend on how much of the lawsuit manages to stand. When it's taken or presented in front of a court. A lot of it could get thrown out, or it could all get put say yes, this is fine. We are going forward with this. Once that's determined, seems like they'll probably come to a settlement of some kind.
Yeah, that's my suspicion as well. I don't think that this is going to go to trial. They just want to get as close as they can to try and increase the amount of money. Because if you look through the lawsuit, ZeniMax was being offered by Oculus some sort of equity or money. So this all seems just more like grand negotiations over what that figure is.
Yeah.
Please add a zero. Please add a zero. Please add a zero. Because probably from ZeniMax's perspective, this whole id Software thing hasn't really worked out.
Not great.
Real well. They bought id Software, gave Wolfenstein to another developer, and Doom, by all reporting about that game's development, seems to be a complete train wreck, and most of the talent seems to have left that studio. So
yeah, I think Rage was a huge drain on that studio and everything, and then it came out to, I'm not going to say zero acclaim, but somewhere in the just hovering above zero acclaim. And I don't think anyone really bought that game either. So yeah, it's been a rough run for id ever since the ZeniMax buyout.
Last night, the Harmonix Kickstarter made it.
Yeah.
Against seemingly naysayers, including myself. I did not think that Kickstarter was going to make it, but they had an inexplicable surge of momentum 3 days before the end, and they sort of rode that to hitting their $775,000 goal last night. I think around 8 or 9 p.m., which is, gotta admit, pretty impressive. I had definitely written them off as being able to make that.
Yeah, I didn't think they were going to be able to do it either. I mean, last week they were, I think at the end of last week they were at like 200-something K, and it looked like just a massive distance between the goal and where they were. But the one thing they did do was add those additional reward tiers. Like that $35 tier that they added seemed to give them a huge boost. Like a lot of people bumped up to that. And then other developers started chipping in. Like I think Insomniac chipped in like $7,500 for that game. A few other studios did, and I'm impressed they managed to pull it off given the short amount of time and the high dollar value they assigned to it. And frankly, I'm glad it happened because I really want to play a new Amplitude game. I think that's I loved Frequency and Amplitude. I loved the spiritual successors they made in the years following. Like there are a lot of people that thought it was kind of gross that a studio like Harmonix would be using Kickstarter for this, but the fact that it was so hard for them to even get over that number, which is like what they said was like half the budget of the actual game, I think speaks volumes to the fact that like those games are niche games. They're cult favorites. They're not massive mainstream successes. It's not an easy gamble for them to make. And also having the slight handicap of basically being beholden to Sony as to whether what platforms those games go on and whether they get published or not. There's a lot of challenges there for them to make one, which is why they probably didn't make one for 11 years or so. So it's. You can think it's gross all you want, but there probably wasn't a good way for them to fund that game themselves entirely. And, I'm just happy that it's coming, because that is a game I very much want to play.
Yeah, and it's actually, like, not super far off, right? Like, the game's supposed to be delivered, was it March or May of next year?
Yeah, I think they said next year.
Yeah, no, I wonder what this means for... I have to imagine other developers were watching this pretty closely.
Yeah.
I have to imagine this could have implications for other companies deciding to throw their hat into the ring. But, I don't... Harmonix is a company that has specifically cultivated a community. Not every developer has that, even developers that make really good games.
Yeah.
So, one thing's that, Rock Band and Guitar Hero, like, Harmonix has a lot of community people that is very close to their community. That is a big reason that this Kickstarter, was probably able to turn around. Getting a lot of companies to chip in $7,500 also helps kickstart momentum. But
Sure.
I don't think the lesson from this should be like every other sort of big studio could do something like this, because I just don't think that's true. And I think there's an equal possibility universe where Harmonix did not pull this off.
Yeah, yeah, and if it hadn't pulled it off, that would have been a real bummer. And it would have probably probably would have suggested that maybe there isn't necessarily room for all studios to use Kickstarter this way. And I still don't think there necessarily is. I think that it's you have to have a project that people really want. It doesn't matter how big your studio is. You have to have something that people actually want to play. And in this case, there were just enough people that wanted to play Amplitude that they were able to fund this. And I don't know, whatever. I don't think this is going to lead to some incredible snowballing of every studio trying to kickstart everything. I don't think that's going to become somehow like this default model now that a studio like Harmonix has done this. Because whatever, Double Fine already did it. Like other independent studios have done this. Yeah, twice. So it's like fine, for projects like this where you can tell that there is not going to be a publisher giving them the money to just do this. I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
Yeah, and I think definitely this exposes a little bit more about how much we don't understand how games are funded, or how much games cost.
Yeah.
Rather, I think that has been a telling part about this Kickstarter, is coming to grips with, oh man, like games studios that want to pay their people properly and have health benefits and all the things that go along with having a proper studio, theoretically, $775,000 goes away really, really quickly.
Yeah. And I mean, Harmonix, is not as big of a studio as it once was. Like, it used to be like a 300-person studio. It is nowhere near that now. But they still have a good number of employees, and they have multiple projects going on. And so, they have to basically decide, can we fund a section of our team making this game for, the better part of the next year? And that's not going to be cheap, unless you're literally just putting 3 people on it, which that would not result in the game I think people want to play if they had done that.
Peter in the chat asks, do you think Plastic Instruments will make a return at some point this generation?
I want to say yes. I don't think they will in the form that we remember them from. Like, if someone does a new guitar game, or someone does something with drums or whatever else, it's not going to just be another version of the 5-button game that we were all used to playing. I don't feel like the interest level would be enough to justify the cost of making that. So they'd have to do something pretty radically different. I mean, I don't know if it's just going the Rocksmith route and just like literally just like, here's a thing you plug your guitar into, do that. It may not be that, but it has to be something different, because I think, the reason the Plastic Instrument bubble burned out the way it did before was because those games were super fun, but you hit a wall at a certain point. Like, once you're an expert at all those games, you can just kind of play all those songs, and you're just basically waiting for new songs to come along. There's not like a lot of growth in that. I mean, Rock Band 3 was interesting because it added the real guitar stuff and the keyboard stuff and all the other all those other things. It just, by that point, people had sort of burned out on the whole Plastic Instrument thing, and so that game did not get much traction. Rocksmith, for its part, has been doing pretty well, I think, and most people who play those games seem to really like them. So I think
it's also very focused.
Yeah,
right? Like, it's not. Rocksmith is not trying to be broad appeal. Rocksmith has a very specific intent, and it does that by all accounts very, very well.
Yeah. So if the broader, more mainstream version of music games like that is going to come back, it's going to have to be a way to take the more complicated act of playing something closer to a real guitar or real drums or whatever. And finding a way to balance that in a way that the people will actually be willing to invest in. Because I think if you just put out another 5-button controller and be like, look, here's more Guitar Hero, here's more Rock Band, most people are going to be like, I've got like 6 of these already, and if they don't work with the new systems, then I don't want to buy more. That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, because that's a reality, right? None of the devices you own are going to work on these new machines, and these new games are not going to come out on the old machines. So, like, that's the catch-22 with that stuff, is like, could they come up with inventive new software that was interesting and compelling, especially when you start to imagine subscription services?
Yeah.
Probably. But the big hurdle is, how do you convince people to spend another $200, $300 on the peripherals? Like that's a real struggle. I thought what Sony decided to do with SingStar this week is really smart. I suppose we have to make sure it works in practice, but theoretically, this new SingStar, they'll probably put out a high-end microphone that you can purchase, but you can download an app and use your phone as the microphone. And if anyone's ever recorded audio with their phone, those microphones are pretty dang good. Like I don't know how good. I'm not an audio guy, so I don't know how they are relative to a real microphone. Obviously, there's probably a vast difference, but they sound pretty good to my ears. And if that works, obviously you can't really extend that to guitars and bass and drums, but I think that is a really smart way for Sony to say, hey, we want to put another SingStar, but man, like, are we going to really ask people to spend $120, whatever it costs to get a microphone bundle? Like, yeah, we'll put that out. Maybe some people will want it, but for most people, hey, the phone will work just fine.
So here's a new game where you have to play the real guitar into the microphone of your telephone, and that will transfer into the game, and so the game will recognize your guitar playing, but it has to go into the phone. There, that's it. I've saved music games.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, everyone will buy it. It'll be great.
Lost Archives says in the chat that they've said the old mics and wireless mics will work too. If that's true, that's awesome.
Well, the mics are just USB mics. I mean,
what about the wireless ones?
They're still just, I think, just USB plugins. Like, they don't have the controller guts built into them the way that the guitars and the drums did. Like, that was why you always had to use a regular controller to navigate with the microphone when you were the singer in those games, because the mics never had any of that stuff. It was basically just USB tech. So that'll work.
Cool. Well, either way, it's super smart, and I really hope that they do a subscription. So what I'd love to see from SingStar is if I could pay like $15 like on a Friday evening and just get access to the whole library for 24 hours.
Yeah.
That's what I want. Like I am so over buying single track stuff. I will not do it. It's the same reason I won't buy Super Mario Brothers 1 again on a virtual console. I'm done. I've done it 5 times. I'm over it. And I'm in the same way with music games. Like I am not going to buy single tracks again. But if SingStar somehow allowed me to do a karaoke mode, which is like, hey, you're just renting it for the evening, that sounds fantastic.
The a la carte model was something you could only do for one generation because the technology and the licensing and all that stuff, like, you could get away with that for the duration of an entire generation. And, I think that both Activision and Harmonix and also like Sony for SingStar, they all kind of lucked out in the sense that they, that generation lasted a lot longer than other console generations had in the past. In the case of the future, it's like you said, they can't. Obviously, none of that stuff that you've already bought will carry over. I think asking people to re-buy songs that they would have already bought on a previous console will not fly with anybody, especially people who spend a lot of money on that stuff. So yeah, you're right. I think a subscription model is the only way to go with that if they're going to do it. It's the only way to give people the music they want while not making them feel cheated for having spent money in the previous generation.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be curious. I suspect Rock Band will come back. What form, with peripherals or not, I don't know. I'm definitely curious to see what Harmonix thinks about that. If Activision comes up with a way to bring Guitar Hero back, it'll be. I suspect at least Rock Band will come back at some point. It's just a matter of what is that? Is it hardware based? I don't know, but I'm definitely curious to see what they end up doing with it.
Same.
So I think that's a show.
I think that's a show.
That's it. We will not have a show on Monday because I am going to be in the Dominican Republic from Saturday to Thursday. But
you lucky son of a bitch.
Assuming I get back on time, we should be able to do a Friday show. I should be back sometime on Thursday afternoon. I'm planning to do as little as possible during that 5-day period because I think my wife will stab me if I do anything. I've negotiated 10 to 15 minutes each day to check in on E3 booking, and that's
right.
about all I have been given leeway on, or else, or else I may come back in a real sorry state. But I'm really excited about it because I never take vacations.
Yeah, that's great. Look, and when you come back, I want all this that you have going right there. I
Uh-huh.
want that to be at least 2 or 3 shades darker. I want you to get some sun, just relax. I want to see you in prime shape when you come back next week.
Folks are asking Alex if you're going to go see the new X-Men this weekend, which I'd be doing if I was around, but I will be gone.
I might. I'm more likely to go see Godzilla finally because I have not had a chance to do that yet, and I have some time this weekend not reviewing things to finally go do that. So I will probably go see one of those two at least, if not both. But yeah, I will definitely see Godzilla. So at least there's that.
And also, congratulations to Mr. Gary Whitta, who
Ah,
we
yes.
discovered yesterday is going to be the writer on one of the Star Wars spin-offs with, speaking of Godzilla, the director of Godzilla, Garth Edwards. They are writing and directing a spin-off that is coming out, I believe, in December 2016 as Disney moves to sort of Marvelize the Star Wars universe and have films that are in between the major ones. So episode 7, right? That's the next one that's coming
Yes.
out, right? That comes out not this December, but next December, and then Gary and Garth's movie will come out the following December after that. And we don't know what it's about, but oh my God, the fact that I can say I am friends with someone that is writing a Star Wars film is something that I still cannot quite wrap my head around, and I feel bad for as much as I am excited for Gary.
Yeah, I mean that's an amazing thing to be a part of, and knowing the kind of nerd that Gary is, I imagine this has probably been the most exciting time of his life. The only question that remains is that will he find a way to put Will Smith in the new Star Wars?
Yeah.
Either of them, like the
yeah, I was
one
gonna say,
that he works with in movies or the tested one, doesn't matter. But both, you know what? Put them both. Other side, one's a Sith, one's a Jedi. Put them against each other. Right?
Sold.
Yeah,
See,
that's a fucking movie right there.
This is my favorite part about the next 2.5 years of Gary's life is assholes like us who know him pitching him really stupid ideas
Yeah.
about a new Star Wars film. But congratulations to him. That is amazing, amazing news. It's crazy. I don't know. There really are not words for it except that congratulations, because that is really damn cool. I will mention now that I'm going to try and record a premium Q&A to go up next week while I am gone. So if you want to send me a message on Giant Bomb, just flag it as premium. You can send me a message on Tumblr or email me or whatever, but just send those, and then I'll collect the ones that come in this morning, record that this afternoon to go up next week. I'm also hoping to tonight, once the sun goes down, to record a quick look of Among the Sleep. I got a code for that this morning, actually. That's the horror game where you play as a 2-year-old crawling around as his house goes to shit. So that comes out on the 29th, so I'm going to try and record that before I get out of here. I'm trying to cram in as much as I can to have some things sprinkle out next week. So send over some questions, and I'll record that quick look. But otherwise, Alex, I'm going to see you next week.
Have a fun vacation. See you next
I
time.
will.
Oh.